friends, and welcome to Jewels of Truth. My name is Daniel Fontenot. Today we will continue studying the book of Daniel and chapter 11, particularly verse 4, actually, 3 and 4, but particularly verse 4. And this presentation is entitled The Sudden End of Babylon. Why do I say Babylon when because the word Babylon is not even in these verses? Well, it's because verse 3 represents the threefold union of modern Babylon. Whenever it says, and a mighty king shall stand up and that shall rule with great dominion and do according to his will, okay, that right there represents the threefold union of Babylon, and I have explained that in previous presentations. I'm not going to take time to do that at this time. And of course, we know that the threefold union of modern Babylon is the beast, the dragon, and the false prophet, which are the papacy, the United Nations, and apostate Protestantism. So notice here about the sudden end of Babylon, and we read in the previous study that Babylon, it was broken, just like Alexander's kingdom was broken, okay? So here, Babylon is fallen suddenly. Thus saith the Lord, this is Jeremiah 51, verses 1 through 9. Thus saith the Lord, behold, I will raise up against Babylon and against them that dwell in the midst of them that rise up against me a destroying wind. Okay, a destroying wind. And will send unto Babylon fanners that shall fan her, and shall empty her land, for in the day of trouble they shall be against her round about. Against him that bendeth, let the archer bend his bow, and against him that lifteth up himself up in his brigandine, and spare ye not her young men. Destroy ye utterly all her host. Thus the slain shall fall in the land of the Chaldeans, at the land of Babylon, and they that are thrust through in the streets. For Israel hath not been forsaken, nor Judah of his God, of the Lord of hosts, though their land was filled with sin against the Holy One of Israel. Flee out of the midst of Babylon, and deliver every man his soul. Be not cut off in her iniquity, for this is the time of the Lord's vengeance. He will render unto her a recompense. Babylon hath been a golden cup in the Lord's hand, that made all the earth drunken. The nations have drunken of her wine, their wine of false doctrine, particularly the false Sabbath, Sunday. Therefore the nations are mad. Babylon is suddenly fallen and destroyed. Howl for her, take balm for her pain. If so, she may be healed. We would have healed Babylon, but she is not healed. Forsake her, and let us go every one into his own country, for her judgment reacheth unto heaven, and is lifted up even to the skies. A lot of this, the book of Revelation borrows from this language, in particularly of Revelation chapter 18. So why do I bring up the sudden fall of Babylon in the context of Daniel 11 and verse 4? Because Alexander the Great, his death came suddenly, as is spoken of here in E.J. Wagner's book From Eden to Eden. It says, the kingdom of Alexander had suffered no decline when he died. He was in the full tide of victory, not having had time to prepare himself a capital when he fell, slain not in war, but by his depraved and ungovernable appetite, broken in his strength, and for it came up 4 notable ones toward the 4 winds of heaven. The angel said, 4 kingdoms shall stand up out of the nation, but not in his power. Alexander died in BC 323. His death was sudden and unexpected, just like with Babylon. Babylon, its fall will be sudden and unexpected, and Babylon is in these verses because, I say again, when it says, "And a mighty king shall stand up that shall rule with great dominion and do according to his will," that is Babylon. That's the threefold union of Babylon. That's what modern Babylon consists of, and it will fall suddenly and unexpected, just like Alexander did and his kingdom. He being in the prime of life, and no provision had been made for a successor. There were many aspirants for power, among the chief of whom was Antigonus. Lyman, in his historical chart, has given a view of the kingdom after the death of Alexander in a few forcible words. And then he explains that. Let's drop down to the next paragraph. 2 points are worthy of remark in this symbol and its fulfillment. Number 1, prophecy takes no note whatever of this period of anarchy and confusion. It was a period of internal dissensions, in which there was neither time nor opportunity to establish kingdoms on anything like a permanent footing. Number 2, the 4 kingdoms which arose toward the 4 winds of heaven are considered but parts of the same Grecian kingdom. They are no doubt regarded a continuation of the same dominion, because the 4 kings named entered into agreement to divide the kingdom among themselves. They reigned by mutual consent and not in opposition to one another. They were in union. Okay? This is marked in Daniel 7, verse 6, by the simple expression, the beast had also 4 heads. They reigned by mutual consent. That's like the when it says there in Revelation chapter 17, these kings, they were of one mind, okay? And here they reigned by mutual consent. This is a representation, I say again, of modern Babylon. Alexander's death was sudden and unexpected. Suddenness and unexpectancy are elements of the midnight cry and the loud cry. There's so much in this Daniel chapter 11, verses 1 through 4. Brothers and sisters, the depth is so deep. It's almost unfathomable. So Sister White in Christ's Object Lessons tells us about the parable of the 10 virgins on page 412. It is in a crisis that character is revealed. When the earnest voice proclaimed at midnight, "Behold, the bridegroom cometh, go ye out to meet him," okay, and the sleeping virgins were roused from their slumbers, it was seen who had made provision or preparation for the event. Both parties were taken unawares, but one was prepared for the emergency, and the other was found without preparation. So now a sudden and unlooked-for calamity, something that brings the soul face to face with death. And when are our souls brought face to face with death? It is at the Sunday law crisis, the time of the mark of the beast, the enforcement of the mark of the beast. We will come face to face with death, and our characters, which we have formed, are going to be revealed. It is in a crisis that character is revealed. Character is not developed in a crisis, it is revealed. And this crisis comes suddenly and unexpectedly. I could put on a board, which I'm not going to do that, but you could put just the word sudden and unlooked for, okay, or just the word sudden, okay, and it would cover all of these things: the mark of the beast crisis / Sunday law crisis, okay, the unexpected fall, the sudden fall of Babylon, all these things go together. They happen in the same time period. So now, a sudden and unlooked for calamity, something that brings the soul face to face with death, will show whether there is any real faith in the promises of God. That's going to be surely fulfilled during the Sunday law crisis. It will show whether my faith is real, whether your faith is real in the promises of God. It will show whether the soul is sustained by grace. Are our souls sustained by grace? We need to decide that right now because the end is right upon us. The great final test comes at the close of human probation, when it will be too late for the soul's need to be supplied. Again, this Christ Object Lessons, page 412. So, the sudden and unexpected death of Alexander represents the sudden and unexpected fall of the threefold union of modern Babylon. And Alexander represents, to some extent, the kingdom of Babylon. Okay, this happens symbolically at midnight or during the loud cry. And just as God scattered the builders of the Tower of Babel, so Alexander's kingdom was broken and divided toward the four winds of heaven, to all east, north, south, east, and west. And so will modern Babylon be scattered. Okay? Now, the four winds of heaven, we have been discussing the four winds of heaven. We discussed them in the last presentation. Hopefully you have watched that one. Because, again, it says, and when he shall stand up, his kingdom shall be broken and shall be divided toward the four winds of heaven. Okay? The four winds of heaven also represent Islam. Sister White tells us in Manuscript Releases, Volume 20, page 216, or Selected Messages, Book 3, page 409, angels are holding the four winds, represented as an angry horse seeking to break loose and rush over the face of the whole earth, bearing destruction and death in its path. And she also says, in agreement with that, in Manuscript Releases, Volume 20, page 269, she says, we feel depressed, greatly depressed, as we see the world and its wickedness. The professed Christian world is enveloped in the darkness that covers the earth. We sigh and cry for the abominations that are done in the land. Why is it that all this wickedness does not break forth in decided violence against righteousness and truth? It is because the four angels are holding the four winds that they shall not blow upon the earth. But human passions are reaching a high pass, and the Spirit of the Lord is being withdrawn from the earth. Were it not that God had commanded angelic agencies to control the satanic agencies that are seeking to break loose and to destroy, there would be no hope. But the winds are to be held until the servants of God are sealed in their forehead. So just as we know that, William Miller's Rules of Bible Interpretation, one word can symbolize more than just one thing, okay? In the last presentation, we were saying that the four winds of heaven represented the strife and the war among the nations and the contention. But also it represents Islam, okay? An angry horse, it says, seeking to break loose and rush over the face of the whole earth. Why do I say that? We'll understand here in just a moment. Notice in Genesis chapter 16, 11, and 12. And the angel of the Lord said unto her, this is in the context of the birth of Ishmael, behold, thou art with child, and shalt bear a son, and shalt call his name Ishmael, because the Lord hath heard thy affliction. And he will be a wild man, his hand will be against every man, and every man's hand against him. And he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren. Okay? And that wild man there if you look it up in the original Hebrew, it means, among other things, a wild ass. And a wild ass is of the same family as a horse. They're both of the equine family. All right. So I probably won't read this entire thing, but you know, it is really ashamed that it appears to me that most Adventists don't even realize that Revelation 9 represents the story of Islam. Okay, Islam back in the Dark Ages, Islam now. Okay. Anyway, so Uriah Smith, he talks about that. Okay, Revelation 9, verse 7, I'm going to quote that. Revelation 9, verse 7 and verse 16 and 17. And the shapes of the locusts were like horses prepared unto battle. Okay, horses and locusts represent Islam. And on their heads were, as it were, crowns of gold, and their faces were as the faces of men. Further on, verse 16. And the number of the army of the horsemen were 200,000. And I heard the number of them, and thus I saw the horses in the vision, and them that sat on them, having breastplates of fire and of jacinth and brimstone, and the heads of the horses were as the heads of lions. And out of their mouths issued fire and smoke and brimstone. Okay, this is Islam. Read Uriah Smith's account of all of this, how he interprets this. The book which Sister White calls God's Helping Hand. Revelation 9 and verse 1. And the fifth angel sounded, and I saw a star fall from heaven unto the earth, and to him was given the key of the bottomless pit. A star in the figurative language of Revelation is a minister of religion. See Revelation 1 verse 20. The seven stars are the angels, are ministers of the seven churches. A fallen star then would signify a fallen or heretical minister of religion. This was undoubtedly the Arabian impostor Mahomet or Mahomet. There is so general an agreement among Christians, especially Protestant commentators, that the subject of this prediction is Mohammedanism, which is Islam. I shall not enter into the argument at large to prove it, but in passing shall merely give a brief exposition of the symbols used and their application in the text. And let's drop down here to a few paragraphs down here. Locust upon the earth. That these locusts were emblems of an army is clear from verses 7 and 8. And the shapes of the locusts were like unto horses prepared unto battle. And on their heads were crowns of gold. Now, we have already read these verses. Let's drop down to the final paragraph. This description corresponds strikingly with the description history gives us of the Mohammedan horsemen. Number one, the shapes of the locusts, like unto horses prepared for battle. Their headdress, faces of men, hair as the hair of women, and crowns like gold on their heads. Such is the description of a Mohammedan horseman prepared for battle, a horse and a rider with a man's face, so on and so forth, okay? So this, again, goes back to that statement that we read from Sister White. Angels are holding the four winds, represented as an angry horse, representing Islam, seeking to break loose and rush over the face of the whole earth, bringing destruction and death in its path. You know, it's only the Lord, dear brothers and sisters, only the Lord that is holding, his angels are holding back Islam from what they ultimately will do. All right? And of course, this came from Signs of the Times expositor of J.V. Himes, Signs of the Times, and expositor of prophecy, September 7th, 1842. And also speaking of the four winds, notice this from Psalm 48, 4 through 7. For lo, the kings were assembled. They passed by together. They saw it. And so they marveled. They were troubled and hasted away. Fear took hold upon them there, and pain as of a woman in travail. Thou breakest the ships of Tarshish with an east wind. The east wind, the Muslims are from the east. The people, they are considered the people of the east. And the ships of Tarshish, which are the economic, I guess you would call it, but the economic, the financial people there in the world, they are broken with an east wind. Islam ruins the economic structure of Babylon. That's basically what we're saying here. Islam ruins, destroys the economic structure of Babylon. In the Strong's Concordance, now we're going to turn a corner here. The Strong's, because the verse that we began with, that we're studying there, Daniel 11, verse 4, let's go back to that just briefly. Okay? And a mighty king shall stand up that shall rule with great dominion and do according to his will. And when he shall stand up, his kingdom shall be broken and shall be divided toward the four winds of heaven. And notice it says, toward the four winds of heaven. Okay, the Strong's Concordance does not give a definition for the word toward found in Daniel 11, verse 4. The verse states, and when he shall stand up, his kingdom shall be broken and shall be divided toward the four winds of heaven. But we discover that in Daniel 8, verse 9, the Strong's Concordance does give us the definition of the word toward found in that verse. And that verse states, this is Daniel 8, verses 8 and 9, therefore the he-goat, that's Alexander, and he's ruling over the kingdom of Grecia. Therefore the he-goat waxed very great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken, and for it came up four notable ones toward the four winds of heaven, and out of one of them came forth a little horn, which waxed exceeding great toward the south, and toward the east, and toward the pleasant land. And that word toward there, among other words, is the definition, it means by. Okay? The definition is by. So the word toward in Daniel 11, verse 4, can also not only be translated, like towards the four winds of heaven, okay, in that direction, okay, but also by, as in the Strong's Concordance definition. If this is so, then the verse would read, and when he shall stand up, his kingdom shall be broken and shall be divided by the four winds of heaven. And certainly Alexander's kingdom, Greece, was divided by strife, war, and contention. And we saw that in the previous study, represented by the four winds of heaven. Notice also that those four winds are called the four winds of heaven. Could the following two statements give us an indication as to why they are named thus? Okay, so I'm going to again turn a corner here. In Prophets and Kings, page 499, it tells us, in the annals of human history, the growth of nations, the rise and fall of empires appear as if dependent on the will and prowess of man. The shaping of events seems to a great degree to be determined by his power, ambition, or caprice. But in the Word of God, the curtain is drawn aside, and we behold above, behind, and through all the play and counterplay of human interest and power and passions. The agencies, what do we see? The agencies of the all-merciful one silently, patiently working out the counsels of his own will. Okay? So when you think of the four winds of heaven, all right, the four winds of heaven are the war, the contentions, all of these sort of things, the strife among nations. It is Islam, okay? But all of that is under God's control. These are the agencies of the all-powerful one, silently, patiently working out the counsels of his own will. Now, look at this statement here from Volume 1 of the Testimonies, page 266 to 267. This is a perfect illustration. I say a perfect illustration of what we're talking about. Okay? She says, and this is in the context of the American Civil War. She says, I had a view of the disastrous battle at Manassas, Virginia. It was a most exciting, distressing scene. The Southern Army had everything in their favor and were prepared for a dreadful contest. The Northern Army was moving on with triumph, not doubting but that they would be victorious. Many were reckless and marched forward boastingly, as though victory were already theirs. As they neared the battlefield, many were almost fainting through weariness and want of refreshment. They did not expect so fierce an encounter. They rushed into battle and fought bravely, desperately. The dead and dying were on every side. Both the North and the South suffered severely. The Southern men felt the battle, and in a little while would have been driven back still further. The Northern men were rushing on, although their destruction was very great. Just then, it's almost like she's saying suddenly. Just then, an angel descended and waved his hand backward. So he's like this. He's waving his hand backward. Instantly, now when you wave your hand, if I do this, is there not wind? Okay? This is representing the four winds of heaven. Just then an angel descended and waved his hand backward. Instantly there was confusion in the ranks. It appeared, now we'll see a statement, I think it's later on in this study, where I think it was A.T. Jones who said that some years or soon after Alexander died, there was confusion. There was confusion in the kingdom of Greece. Okay, instantly there was confusion in the ranks. It appeared to the northern men that their troops were retreating, when it was not so in reality, and a precipitate retreat commenced. This seemed wonderful to me. So what she's going to explain here in the next paragraph is that when that angel descended and waved his hand backward, okay, it appeared, okay, it says instantly there was confusion in the ranks. Like, you know, I can just picture the men, they're like looking all around. Okay, what's going on here? Okay, it appeared to the northern men that their troops, the northern troops, were retreating, when it was not so in reality. It's almost funny. It's almost comical, but it's very, very interesting. And then a precipitate retreat commenced, okay, because they thought their own troops were retreating. Therefore, everybody thought that they had to retreat, okay? And Sister White says, this seemed wonderful to me. Then it was explained that God had this nation, the United States of America, in his hand. Okay? When you think of in his hand, these are, go back to that previous statement from Prophets and Kings, the agencies, it says, but in the Word of God, the curtain is drawn aside and we behold above, behind, and through all the play and counterplay of human interest and power and passions, the agencies of the all-merciful one silently working out the counsels of his own will. Okay? So it says, then it was explained that God had this nation in his own hand. and would not suffer victories to be gained faster than he ordained. Okay, whether north or south, in this case, he wasn't going to let the northern army he was going to let him be victorious, but not overly victorious, and would permit no more losses to the northern men than in his wisdom he saw fit to punish them for their sins. The Lord, dear friends, was not only punishing the south, but he was punishing the north because they didn't deal with this, partly because they didn't deal with this sin of the south as soon as they should have. Okay? Not only that, but she also explains in other parts of Volume 1 of the Testimonies that there were men in the northern army who were sympathetic to the southern cause of trying to retain slavery. All right? And had the northern army at this time pushed the battle still further in their fainting, exhausted condition, the far greater struggle and destruction which awaited them would have caused great triumph in the south. So he has everything in balance here. God would not permit this and sent an angel to interfere. The sudden falling back of the northern troops is a mystery to all. Interesting, it has the word sudden in there. The sudden falling back of the northern troops is a mystery to all. Oh, yeah. They know not that God's hand was in the matter. And I say again, but in the Word of God, the curtain is drawn aside, and yes, the curtain is drawn aside in this explanation that we just read, and we behold above, behind, and through all the play and counterplay of human interest and power and passions, the agencies of the all-merciful One, silently, patiently working out the counsels of his own will. So whether you're talking about the strife and the wars and the contentions among the nations, or you're talking about Islam, it's all in God's hand. God's hand is in the matter. All right. And this is in agreement with Daniel 2:21 and 4:35. If we apply the two previous passages from the Spirit of Prophecy to Daniel 11, verse 4, we see that although it is the strife, war, and commotion that bring up kingdoms, it is really the agencies of the All-Merciful One silently, patiently working out the counsels of his own will. Thus is fulfilled the Scriptures which say, And he changeth the times and the seasons, he removeth kings and setteth up kings. He giveth wisdom unto the wise, and knowledge to them that know understanding. And all the inhabitants of the earth are reputed as nothing. And he doeth according to his will in the army of heaven, and among the inhabitants of the earth. And none can stay his hand, or say unto him, What doest thou? We can't say to God, Hey, what are you doing? You can't do that. No, God does whatever he wants to do. He has everything. He's all wise. He has everything under control. All right. So we read here from Uriah Smith's book, The Sanctuary and the 2300 Days of Daniel 8:14, page 33. So after he quotes, verse 8, speaking of Daniel 8, verse 8, Therefore the he-goat waxed very great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken, and for it came up four notable ones toward the four winds of heaven. The conqueror is greater than the conquered. The ram, Medo-Persia, became great. The goat, Grecia, became very great. And when he was strong, the great horn was broken. Human foresight and speculation would have said, when he becomes weak, his kingdom racked by rebellion or paralyzed by luxury, then the horn will be broken and the kingdom shattered. But Daniel saw it broken in the very prime of its strength and the height of its power, when every beholder would have exclaimed, Surely the kingdom is established, and nothing can overthrow it. Thus it is often with the wicked. Okay? That's what happens to the wicked. at the height of their power, they are broken. Okay, this last passage, I made a mistake in the reference there. That was from Uriah Smith's Daniel in the Revelation, page 170. And then now in Uriah Smith's book, The Sanctuary and the 2300 Days of Daniel 8:14, page 33, he says, in the place of this first horn, 4 came up toward the 4 winds of heaven. These, the angel said, signified 4 kingdoms to arise out of the nation. After the death of Alexander, much confusion, there it is, much confusion arose among his followers respecting the succession. And if you do a study on the word confusion, okay, you remember there in Genesis chapter 11, the story of the Tower of Babel and its fall. I hope we all understand that this story in Genesis chapter 11 represents the end of the world. It represents the Sunday law crisis. It represents the fall of Babylon. And we notice in verse 9 it says, therefore is the name called Babel. And that word Babel, if you have a marginal reference, it means confusion, okay? So after the death of Alexander, much confusion arose among his followers respecting the succession. I'm not going to read the rest of that. I just wanted to make that one particular point, that after the death of Alexander, much confusion arose among his followers respecting the succession. This, spiritually speaking, is connected with the story of Babylon there in Genesis chapter 11. All right? Now, we have E.J. Wagner's statement from the Present Truth, the UK articles of April 1st, 1897. Alexander stood up and ruled with great dominion. His genius, just like with Great Babylon, it rules with great dominion over the whole world, one world government. His genius seemed to promise the realization of his great scheme of consolidating the East and the West. But at the height of his power, he died in Babylon. This is one of the objects, one of the ambitions of Donald Trump, is to consolidate everything, unify everyone, okay? Notice it says, at the height of his power, he died. Alexander, at the height of his power, died in Babylon, okay? He didn't die in Israel. He didn't die in Syria. He didn't die in Greece. He died in Babylon. He died in Babylon, ironically, because he drank himself to death. Very, very interesting symbology there. Okay? The kings of the earth will die as a result of their drinking the wine of Babylon at the height of their power. All right? At the height of his power, he died. His posterity and all the royal house perished in the intrigue that followed. This is the close of probation. This decided, and then he goes through and shows how the kingdom was divided. This decided the final breakup of the empire. It had been divided toward the 4 winds of heaven, as the angel of the Lord had said. All right? So, we're coming here to the close of this presentation. Speaking of Babylon, the Tower of Babel, okay? Mr. White, in the book Patriarchs and Prophets, tells us they exalted themselves against God, but he would not permit them to complete their work. They had built their tower to a lofty height when the Lord sent 2 angels to confound them in their work, okay? So I hope you're following me in all of this, because this is a strong connection with Daniel 11 and verse 4. At the height of Alexander's power, he died in Babylon. Okay, he had built a, you can say it, a one world government, the known world. Okay, and the same thing with the Tower of Babel. They had built their tower to a lofty height when the Lord sent two angels, the first and the second angels' messages of Revelation chapter 14, to confound them in their work. Men had been appointed for the purpose of receiving word from the workmen at the top of the tower, calling for material for their work, which the first would communicate to the second, and he to the third, until the word reached those upon the ground. As the word was passing from one to another in its descent, the angels confounded their language, and when the word reached the workmen upon the ground, material was called for which had not been required. And after the laborious process of getting the material to the workmen at the top of the tower, it was not that which they wished for. Disappointed and enraged, they reproached those whom they supposed were at fault. After this, there was no harmony in their work. Angry with one another, and unable to account for the misunderstanding and strange words among them, they left the work and separated from each other, and scattered abroad in the earth. Up to this time, men had spoken but one language. Lightning from heaven, as a token of God's wrath, broke off the top of their tower, casting it to the ground. Thus God would show to rebellious man that he is supreme. And you know, whenever it says that these angels, those two angels, they came, they were unseen, evidently, and it says that they confused their language, right? They confused the language of the people. One person, I mean, they were all speaking different languages, so they couldn't work together because they couldn't understand each other. This is really another way of the angels interfering. Okay, go back to that statement about the angel that came in the middle of the northern and southern armies there in the American Civil War. It says, and just then an angel descended and waved his hand backward. Instantly there was confusion in the ranks. What did you have there at the Tower of Babel? Confusion. They confused their language. And that was from Spirit of Prophecy, Volume 1, page 92. I got the two mixed up, Patriarchs and Prophets and Volume 1. Okay, now Patriarchs and Prophets, page 119 and 120. When the tower had been partially completed, speaking of the Tower of Babel, a portion of it was occupied as a dwelling place for the builders. Other apartments, splendidly furnished and adorned, were devoted to their idols. The people rejoiced in their success and praised the gods of silver and gold, and set themselves against the ruler of heaven and earth. Suddenly, just like Babylon, later the kingdom of Babylon during the time of Nebuchadnezzar or Belshazzar, suddenly the work that had been advancing so prosperously, just like Alexander, was checked. Angels were sent to bring to naught the purpose of the builders. The tower had reached a lofty height, and it was impossible for the workmen at the top to communicate directly with those at the base. Therefore, men were stationed at different points, each to receive and report to the one next below him the orders for needed material or other directions concerning the work. As messages were thus passing from one to another, the language was confused by those two angels, so that material was called for which was not needed, and the directions delivered were often the reverse of those that had been given. Confusion and dismay followed. All work came to a standstill. There could be no further harmony or cooperation. The builders were wholly unable to account for the strange misunderstandings among them, and in their rage and disappointment they reproached one another. their confederacy ended in strife and bloodshed. Lightnings from heaven, as an evidence of God's displeasure, broke off the upper portion of the tower and cast it to the ground. Men were made to feel that there is a God who ruleth in the heavens. Just like, and I'm going to keep on saying it, just like in the time of the Civil War, when that angel came and he waved his hand backward, okay, and made the Northern Army think, hey, everyone is retreating. Well, not so in reality. God is ruling in the heavens. He has an all-wise purpose. So we hope that this presentation has been a blessing to all and has been informative. If you agree or appreciate this presentation, then by all means tap that like button at the bottom of this video, or if you have any questions or comments, then by all means place them at the bottom of this video. And if you haven't subscribed, we would highly encourage you to do so. We thank you for joining us here at Jewels of Truth. We hope and pray that you will have a good day in the Lord.